The Codex of Power is one of the brand new systems joining us in Diablo 4. Basically what it is a recipe book or collection book of legendary aspects which can be infused onto your gear. Essentially you unlock these either by playing through the campaign or by doing dungeons, and you can build up an entire roster of these base level legendary aspects or enchantments that you can infuse on your gear. During both beta weekends we could see that 114 legendary aspects were inside the Codex of Power. It's possible that when the full game comes out there could be more than 114, but there's at least 114 which we are fully aware of. Now these break down as follow. Essentially you have 15 aspects which are common and can be used between any of the 5 classes, and then you have 20 each per class for all of them except the rogue, which only comes in at 19. But specifically in this video today we're going to be talking about the 20 legendary aspects available for the Necromancer. And starting us right off, we have Aspect of Bursting Bones, and this basically says that when a segment of Bone Prison, which is a skill for the Necromancer of course, is destroyed or expires, it deals a certain percentage of damage or a number of damage in an area around itself, kind of like a mini AoE. Now the first thing that I mention in each one of these videos is bear in mind that these are the base versions of these legendary aspects, so this is the lowest possible value of any amounts on them, and you can basically see the areas where you can have a higher amount, a better version of this, in the blue numbers inside the description of a legendary aspect. So it's possible that you can find legendary items out there that have this aspect on them but have a much better role, and that is kind of like part of the thing that you do when you start essentially fleshing out your gear and figuring out where you can upgrade. Now getting us back to this particular aspect, Bone Prison itself, how it works is it essentially spawns a circle around you and enemies have to either beat their way through it, or you can also use this to trap enemies inside the circle, and this basically deals damage as soon as some of those walls start coming down. So again, the amount here is not super high, but then again, if you are going to be using Bone Prison a lot, you can at the very least have it also deal some damage, and this can be a way for you to essentially get a little bit of utility out of this skill. Then getting us over to Aspect of Empowering a Reaper. This says that critical strikes from Sever, which is also a skill, has a 10% chance to spawn a pool of Blight, also a skill for the Necromancer, under the target that you hit with the Sever that deals 20% bonus damage. Now you can see both of these percentages can roll higher. Now this effect can only happen once every 3 seconds. Now there are a couple of different aspects which you can actually also use to increase the effectiveness of Blight, and my assumption is that you would get your version of Blight in the case of this aspect here, and not like the base version of Blight, since if it was just the base version of Blight that would probably not be that, you know, tasty. However, the fact is, if you are building a Necromancer, I can imagine a situation where you could potentially be building a spellcaster Necromancer that focuses more into, you know, cancelled or sacrificed minions, and thereby, you know, creating your critical strike chance up, getting your critical strike damage up, and then this will be a fantastic way for you to essentially create AoE pools underneath targets that you hit with Sever. These percentages are fairly low though, so unless you can get this 10%, I would say at least 230, 240 I think would feel really good with this. Then I think it would start becoming very, very effective, but I'm sure that there's probably gonna be a way for you to essentially, you know, benefit off this, and this would be one that I would probably, you know, experiment with. I do like skills that full 2 shoes, you know, that wear, you know, that can cover 2 roles, meaning good direct damage but also, you know, translating into an AoE, and this certainly seems like it could facilitate that. Then we have Aspect of Grasping Veins, which says that you gain a percentage increased critical strike chance for 6 seconds when you cast Corpse Tendrils, also obviously a skill. You deal a percentage bonus critical strike damage to enemies damaged by Corpse Tendrils. So this basically turns Corpse Tendrils into an opener spell for you, because this is a good way to basically buff up any additional damage from a skill after you hit stuff with Corpse Tendrils. It's so far a lot of these aspects that we've been talking about here, and I suspect some of the additional ones that we're going to see it tends to hint towards like not so much like the minion playstyle of the Necromancer, but more like focusing on really augmenting the skills that are available, the spells, if you want to call it that. So this seems to be pretty good. 30% additional bonus critical strike damage, and this is just the base version, is not bad at all. Corpse Tendrils, of course, is an AoE, so this is a way for you to basically hit a bunch of enemies with this AoE and then make the follow-up damage on them be, you know, kind of sexy. Then we have Aspect of Plunging Darkness, which says that Bone Prison spawns a pool of blight that deals 50% bonus damage over 6 seconds. So this is our second aspect that essentially buffs up Bone Prison. This means that when you summon the Bone Prison, you will have a pool of blight basically in the middle of this Bone Prison, so you can definitely start using this literally as a prison, trapping a bunch of enemies on the inside of it. And then if you combine it with the other aspect here, when they try to break out of that, the Bone Prison shards are going to deal damage to them, and they'll also be taking damage from this blight pool that they're standing in. And of course, blight itself has some enhancements and things that you can put on it as well. So this is kind of cool. I think this is going to be really good against trash, and if you're able to, you know, really buff up the effect that you get from blight, then it's probably also going to you know, it's going to be really good at dealing with huge amounts of like packs, you know, smaller enemies that are charging you down. I don't know if it's going to be that good in terms of taking down elites or boss enemies, but then again, I do like the trap aspect of this, because a lot of the Necromancer's skills are targetable AoEs. In other words, you know, you can basically shoot at an enemy and then it deals a whole bunch of damage around that enemy with those AoEs. And it certainly makes sense that if you can create a Bone Prison that traps the enemy, so now they can't move out of the area where you're gonna AoE. They've got a blight underneath them. If they hit the Bone Prison, they take damage, and now you still dump more AoEs on them. So definitely something I'm gonna try out. I kind of like the idea of it. I think a lot of people are gonna be defaulting to Minion Necromancer, which is very strong, certainly for leveling. But I think once we start getting to the mid to late game, you're gonna have to start looking at additional ways of basically augmenting the Necromancer, because I think your minions are going to die awful lot, and you know, interactions like this with Bone Prison could just be, you know, the way. We have Aspect of Potent Blood next, which says that while at full life, Blood Orbs grant 10 essence. Now, Blood Orb is a unique thing to the Necromancer, I believe, and essentially what it does is it heals you and any active minions that you have for a percentage of life. This then means that if you are at full life, instead of getting life, you actually get essence. Essence is, of course, your primary resource that you use to cast all of your other abilities. And I think this is pretty good, because there's also a bunch of other skills which actually benefit off of Blood Orb. Blood Orb, by the way, also drops down the cooldown of your ultimate for every Blood Orb that you pick up. I think it's something like 0.5%. And actually also increases your damage output for a short amount of time. So I think, again, I don't want to keep referencing to the same point here, but it's probably going to make a difference once you start playing a, you know, spellcaster Necromancer, and you start looking at ways of additionally buffing your damage, buffing your utility, buffing your synergy with your other skills, and also your resource generation, and this is definitely that. Aspect of Reanimation is next, which says that your skeletons gain increased damage while alive up to a percentage after 10 seconds. I actually used this in the beta, and it was phenomenal. That you could really feel the difference in terms of like the output that you were getting from your skeletons. Of course, this applies to your melee skeletons as well as your skeleton mages, so that's really good. And unfortunately, the Necromancer took a little bit of like a, I would say, a nerf with the patch that they announced shortly after the second beta weekend. And your minions will be dying more regularly now. They're not going to be quite as tough, because let's be honest, during weekend 2, I think your minions basically never died. Like, I think the only time my minions died was on the Butcher or on the World Boss, and so they're gonna be a little bit more fragile now, which might make this not as great as I experienced it in beta 2, but I still think just the fact that, you know, the longer these skeletons stay alive, they're just gonna keep hitting harder. And I mean, you have a whole bunch of them, and yeah, it's really beneficial. If you're gonna be playing a minion build, there aren't a lot of aspects that help minion builds, and this is definitely one of them, so it kind of like seems like it needs to be an auto include. Then we have Aspect of Swelling Curse. This says that Bone Spirit, which by the way could very well be the best damage dealing spell or ability that the Necromancer has. We're gonna have to do a whole bunch of testing and stuff, but some of the things that I've seen with Bone Spirit, as well as some of the things that I've, you know, seen other players theorycraft, and some of the things that I've heard about Bone Spirit, and, you know, the uniques and some of the effects that are available for this in the full version of the game, certainly make it seem like Bone Spirit could be, you know, disgusting at high levels. But this says that Bone Spirit deals increased damage based on distance traveled up to a certain percentage. Of course, this percentage can go much higher. So how Bone Spirit works is you basically conjure up this ball, and then it travels from you almost like a homing missile, and then hits the target that you're shooting it at. So this will just incrementally step up the damage as it's traveling. So again, if you're going to be using Bone Spirit, kind of makes sense that you would auto include this. Aspect of the Damned is next, and this says that you deal a percentage increased shadow damage to enemies afflicted by both Decrepify and Iron Maiden. So this means that you need to be using Decrepify and Iron Maiden, and when you do, and you have both of those AoEs, they're essentially debuff AoEs on a group of enemies, then you will be dealing additional damage to those enemies. This seems to me, I mean, it says you deal increased damage, so it would be interesting if this effect was also available for your allies in co-op. I kind of think it probably doesn't, and it makes me sad. But this would be great if this was you and your group, but I think it would expressly say that if that was the case. But the bottom line is, I think that there is gonna be a place for necromancers in 4-man teams or in co-op teams, where you are essentially the debuffer and the class that lowers the effectiveness of the enemies that you're going up against, and makes it a little bit easier for you and your allies to deal with those enemies. And this is certainly something like that, because both Decrepify and Iron Maiden would fit into that style of necromancer. And yeah, if you're not using both Decrepify and Iron Maiden, this is a dead aspect, and obviously then it means nothing to you. Aspect of Torment is up next, and this says that critical strikes with bone skills like Bone Spear, Bone Spirit, all of those, increase your essence regeneration by a percentage for 4 seconds. Now, if you are going to be playing a spellcaster necromancer, you are going to have to build some synergies into your character that allow you to regenerate your casting resource, your primary resource, which is essence, as fast as possible. Most likely you will be trying to lean into critical strikes and to critical strike damage, so you can get nice big hits off of your Bone Spear, Bone Spirit, and all of those things. And then this certainly does mean that if you do get critical strikes with them, and of course we also have some basic skills which also qualify as bone skills. So if you get critical strikes with any of those, they're just gonna increase your essence regeneration by like a certain percentage, which is pretty good. Blighted aspect is next, and this says that you deal a percentage increased damage for 6 seconds after the Shadow Blight key passive damages enemies 10 times. Now, when you have your Book of the Dead, there are some options in there that you can essentially select, and pretty much what it comes down to is you either play a minion based necromancer, and then you pick upgrades which give your minions more thorns, or give them the ability to charge enemies, or give them the ability to stun enemies and all that. Or what you can do is you can sacrifice the ability to summon those minions, and thereby you can get an effect, a passive effect onto you. Now, some of these passive effects are fairly straightforward and just give you like a flat, bonus to your critical strike chance, or they'll give you more critical strike damage, or they'll give you more essence regeneration. But one of the effects that you can also get from there is Shadow Blight. Now this says that you deal, and it's already starting out at 50%, so this could very much scale quite higher. Increased damage for 6 seconds after this passive damage. Key passive damages enemies 10 times. So the Shadow Blight key passive has to damage 10 times, so 10 enemies, or it has basically proc 10 times, and when that happens you deal increased damage for 6 seconds. So there's a ramp up period here, and then essentially you dump a whole bunch of damage. So again, I experimented a lot with Minion Necromancer during both not both betas, during the second beta, and I can say that I probably spent about maybe 6-7 hours trying to build a necromancer that didn't use minions at all and used sacrifice and everything, and I was quite happy with the results that I was getting from that. It was of course a completely different playing style, and minion necromancer was so damn strong in the second beta weekend that It was extremely, you know, how can I say, it was like the preferred way to go, because it was just the fastest way that you can level. It was extremely efficient. But I definitely think that when we get to the point where leveling is not your main concern anymore, and you're thinking about things like clear speed and thinking about being able to deal the maximum amount of damage, then aspects like this will basically come into view. Next up, we got Bloodseeker's Aspect. And this mentions that Bloodlands deals times 15% increased damage to its primary target per lanced enemy. So Bloodlands has a skill. How that works on the Necromancer is you essentially throw this lance and impale it in an enemy, and then it creates a dot on the enemy that lingers for another, I think it's 3 seconds, dealing damage. And this dot increases its power based on how many other enemies have a Bloodlance in them. So the way that you can basically use this particular aspect is, let's say you have a very tough enemy and like 2 weaker enemies next to the very tough enemy. Well, it doesn't have to be next to him, but in this case what you would do is you would throw your first Bloodlance into one of the weak enemies, then your second Bloodlance into the second weak enemy, and then you would throw your third Bloodlance into the main enemy. Now once you do that, you're going to still have the ticks coming off the other 2, and that's going to increase the tick damage on the third one. And then what you can do in this case is maybe quickly just still lance back to one of the weak enemies, and essentially what you do is you just rotate Bloodlances on these enemies, always making sure that you have the maximum amount of enemies lanced onto your main target, which is the difficult enemy, the enemy with a huge amount of health, and that will mean that this will deal a whole bunch more damage. Now this of course means, you know, you got to manage your Bloodlance, so you got to pick out enemies and shoot in between enemies or something like that. But this is also cool, like in a case of, like, let's say you're just fighting a pack, right? This is a great way for you to share damage between 3 enemies in a pack or something like that. I'm not a particular huge fan of Bloodlands. I did not enjoy this skill a lot in the beta, so I'm not exactly going to sing its praises here, but this is certainly a way for you to increase the functionality of Bloodlands. Then we have Bloodbathed Aspect, and this says that Blood Surge's Nova echoes again after a short delay, dealing 70% less damage. Now, I used Blood Surge a lot in the beta. I thought it was phenomenal. Essentially what it is it's an AoE around your Necromancer, and when you buff it up by choosing some of the upgrades that you can put on Blood Surge, essentially what it does is it converts a bunch of its damage into HP for you. So just really, really good at not only dealing damage, but also keeping you topped off and keeping you alive. And essentially this would be, you'd press it, you'd go Blood Surge, and then, you know, it would go onto a short cooldown. Well, no, actually it didn't have a short cooldown. It's essentially just the amount of essence that you spent on it, and basically you could cast this like 3, 4, 5 times before your essence pool was empty, and then you'd have to wait for your essence pool to fill back up. What this does though is it doubles up on the amount of blood surges that you get. So let's say, for instance, with a full pool of essence on your Necromancer, you're able to fire off 4 of these. That means that you're actually getting 8. Now the echoes, they are dealing quite a bit less damage. Now you want this one, for this aspect to improve, you want this amount to be basically as less as possible. So if you can get this to scale all the way down to, like, let's say 20%, then you're still getting like 80% blood echoes off of these blood surges, and that's going to be pretty damn good. It's a fantastic way. I was using this with Minion Necromancer, and it was a great way to finish off enemies that somehow made it through, like your giant carpet of skeletons and your golem. Next up is Fast Blood Aspect that says that Blood Orbs reduce your ultimate cooldown by 0.5 seconds. This is what I was talking about before, so I didn't mean to misspeak before if I made it seem like Blood Orbs just did this by default, but this is a way for you to essentially augment your Blood Orbs that you pick up to also reduce your ultimate by 0.5 seconds for every Blood Orb that you pick up. If you don't have this aspect on, then Blood Orbs of course will not reduce your ultimate cooldown. Then Flesh Rending Aspect. This mentions that after decompose spawns a corpse, gain 10 essence. Now, decompose is one of my more favorite skills, I would say, from the beta. Essentially what it is it's like this corrosive beam that you shoot, and it essentially eats the enemy's, you know, life off. And you can actually upgrade decompose to, while you're decomposing an enemy and it's not dead yet, their corpses will spawn around that enemy, and then of course as your decompose finishes off an enemy, immediately you get a corpse from that. So this is pretty sweet, because if you do have the upgrades on decompose on, and there's another aspect in the game that essentially lets you decompose chain to another couple of enemies, then it means that you're going to be spawning a shitload of corpses, which is great for minion necromancer, because that means you have extra supplies of bodies in case your skeletons die. But this is also just going to give you a whole bunch of your primary resource back. So let's say, for instance, you are using, you know, some AoEs or something like that, so you're going to be able to decompose. It fills you up nicely, enemies all around you, blood surge, blood surge, blood surge. Now your essence is empty, you start decomposing again, and suddenly your essence pool fills up again. So I think this is pretty good. I had a lot of fun with Decompose in the beta, and I'll probably add this on to my rotation when we do play the full game. The next up is Hulking Aspect, which is a aspect that targets your golem. This says that your golem has a percentage chance to reduce its active cooldown by 2 seconds and a 5% chance to spawn a corpse each time it damages an enemy with its normal attack. So I think that I don't know how many aspects in total we will have that benefit the golem, but this is a really good one that has a bunch of utility built into it. First of all, just the fact that even though it's a small percentage, which can probably scale a little bit higher, maybe 20-25%, chance to spawn a corpse each time it damages an enemy with its normal attack, that is just free corpses for you. Corpses is a major resource for the necromancer. It's bodies for you to get skeletons from. It's, you know, fuel for a corpse explosion and all of that. So that's just really good. But then what this also does is it gives a chance that the golem can reduce its active cooldown by 2 seconds. So what active cooldown means is that if you are playing a minion necromancer, let's say for instance you're going full fucking tilt, so you have the skeleton warriors, you have the skeleton mages, and you have the golem. They also have activatable abilities, which you get by pressing the summon button. And you will see that the button, if you highlight your cursor over it, there will be a passive effect, which is of course summoning the skeletons, but there's also an active effect. Now the golem's active effect, I believe, is like a slam, and it deals like a whole bunch of additional damage. So this is just a way for you to get access to that slam, that active ability, as soon as possible. So again, if you're going to be running a golem, which I think 95% of necromancers leveling up, you know, is going to do, then it kind of seems silly not to have this in, just due to the fact that it adds so much utility. Then we have Requiem Aspect. This is really great. This says that you gain a percentage maximum essence. In other words, your essence pool is bigger per active minion. Again, if you're playing minion necromancer, and if you get the aspects that get you more skeletons and get you more skeleton mages, and then you have your golem, you can end up in a situation where you have 12 minions in total. Now, just using this 3% maximum essence here, we're already talking about 36 additional essence in your pool. However, this amount can go up. Let's imagine it goes, you know, worst case scenario to like 10. I don't think it will, but let's imagine it does. Then you're literally talking about like 120 additional essence, which is like another 4 casts of Blood Surge. So that's pretty sick. And again, if you're playing minion necromancer, you're gonna be concentrating on buffing up those minions as possible, but you're also gonna have 1 or 2, you know, abilities that are your heavy hitters that you use to take down tough enemies. This can be Bone Spear, Bone Spirit, anything like that, and those spells require a lot of essence to fire. So having as big a pool of essence is one thing, and then having a way of regenerating that essence is the other thing. This has got the pool problem solved cold. Then we have Sacrificial Aspect, which says that your sacrifice bonuses are increased by 15%. Now, this is what I was talking about before. So if you're playing non-minion necromancer, you can choose to sacrifice the ability of having those minions around, and you will get, you know, some benefit there. Like, it'll improve your critical strike chance, critical damage, your movement speed, whatever. There's a whole bunch of different ones you can get depending on which sacrifice option you pick. This is just going to increase those bonuses by a percentage, and it starts at 15%. So this can obviously scale higher. And if this goes as high as, like, I mean, even 30% is pretty damn dope. If this goes up to like 50% or something, now we're talking. And again, if you're playing minion-less necromancer, it's kind of like makes sense that you would automatically include this. Then we also have Splintering Aspect, and this says that Bone Spear's primary attack makes enemies hit beyond the first vulnerable for 1.5 seconds. Bone Shards from Bone Spear deal 50% additional bonus damage to vulnerable enemies and pierce them. So Bone Spear's primary attack, essentially what they mean by Bone Spear is like a railgun with like, you know, a bone spear. So this means that if 3 enemies are standing, when you hit them, the first target that it passes through, all right, and then any target after that. So if you're hitting 3 enemies, enemy number 2 and number 3 will now be vulnerable. And vulnerable, of course, means that they take additional damage. Now that's good, because Bone Spear deals less damage to each enemy that it hits in the chain. So this essentially unifies that damage and gets those enemies to again take just a huge amount of damage. Now, Bone Shards is something that happens when the Bone Spear passes through things. It essentially, you know, can do a little bit of damage around it. And this says that it will deal additional damage. These Bone Shards will deal additional damage to the enemies that are vulnerable and also pierce them. So this turns not only your original shot of Bone Spear is piercing already, but this means that the Bone Shards also pierce. And this is a phenomenal upgrade for Bone Spear. This is pretty damn good. I thought Bone Spear was dope as fuck in the beta. It was dealing some insane damage, especially in a sacrifice necromancer. You could really get some 1, 2, 3 tap situations where you were hitting like an elite, like, you know, 2 times, 3 times, and the elite was going down. So this is kind of like really good, and I think that this would be an auto include in that situation. Then we have Torturous Aspect, which says that enemies afflicted by your Iron Maiden have a percentage chance to be stunned for 1 second when they deal direct damage. Now, Iron Maiden is essentially what I would call a debuff AoE, so it's something that you put on enemies to, you know, kind of like CC them in a way, but also just decrease the efficiency of those enemies. And this just makes Iron Maiden even that much more debilitating to be on enemies, because this means that when they try to deal direct damage, and this can be to you or to your minions, then there's a chance that they will get stunned. So this is a fantastic way to just build some passive CC into Iron Maiden, and you know, I'm there for it. It's pretty damn cool. Then we have Unyielding Commander's Aspect, and this says that while Army of the Dead, which is an ultimate skill for the Necromancer, is active, your minions gain a percentage attack speed and take a certain percentage also reduced damage. Now, when you summon Army of the Dead, it summons a bunch of additional minions in. But the cool thing about this aspect is that those minions are empowered by this, but also your minions that you have already. So in the case of Minion Necromancer, you're gonna have like, I think 5 skeleton mages, you're gonna have 6 normal skeletons, you're gonna have your golem, and this is just gonna make all of them deal faster damage. Their attack speed is increased, and they're also gonna take less damage, so they can be a little bit hardier and survive. So this is essentially like your trigger button when you fight like a heavy enemy, a boss or something like that. You go Army of the Dead, you're gonna get all those additional minions, and your current minions are also just gonna absolutely kick ass. Now, holy shit, we made it. That is all 20 of the legendary aspects in the Codex of Power for the Necromancer detailed. Now, as I did with the previous videos, I will pick 3 of these 20, which not necessarily I consider them to be broken or like the best, but they interest me enough to think about ways in which I could roll them into builds and use them. And these are in no particular order, but I think Aspect of Reanimation is pretty damn good, and an auto include in minion builds, which will certainly be super popular in the game, especially in early game and mid game as you're trying to push your way to 100. Then I think Requiem Aspect is really good, just because of the additional, you know, essence that you get if you are playing minions. It's gonna give you so much essence to work with to essentially shoot out as many bone spears, bone spirits, whatever, you know, corpse explosions, whatever your thing is, whatever you want to do. And then last but not least, Sacrificial Aspect, where your sacrifice bonuses are increased by a fixed percentage, is obviously something that I'm going to experiment with, because once we get to the end game, and I think at that point in time minion based Necromancer becomes less I think efficient, less effective, we're gonna have to start looking at ways in which we can turn our Necromancer into a spell, you know, casting powerhouse, and Sacrificial Aspect is definitely, you know, the route to doing that. Let me know in the comments down below if you are planning on rolling a Necromancer day one, which one of these aspects has got you all hot and bothered and has got you thinking of ways of using them in your builds. Also, let me know if you're not rolling a Necromancer, you're rolling something else instead. I am making a build video for each one of the character classes starting out, and I'm also doing this Codex of Power video. So if I haven't featured your class yet, it means that the video is coming. Otherwise, obviously just check out the channel and you will find what you are looking for. Last but not least, I do want to mention that I have a giveaway event running at this moment right now. The details of that is in the description of this video. It's a short video that you can watch. I am giving away 3 copies of the base version of Diablo 4 draw on the platform of your choice, and I'll be doing a live draw on the 1st of June where I'll pick 3 people, you know, live on air from all of the people that have entered, and I absolutely wish you luck, and I hope that you're one of the people that win it. But I also do hope that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.